In today's video, we're discussing some NHL trade rumors involving the Winnipeg Jets, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Minnesota Wild. We'll get into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some more NHL trade rumors to discuss today. I want to kick things off first of all with a quick note on the Minnesota Wild. This actually took place more so on the weekend, but the Wild had defenseman Nick Seeler on waivers, and he was claimed by the Chicago Blackhawks. So the physical defenseman will have an opportunity to hopefully get some more ice time. Of course, he's been injured this year. He's only played in 6 games for Minnesota, was the odd man out oftentimes as well after returning. And Chicago certainly could use an extra defenseman with guys like DeHaan and Seabrook out for the season. The Hawks are still in the playoff race, so it kind of makes sense that they would put in a claim to bring in somebody with a little bit of experience like that, so he could certainly be valuable over there. So Nick Seeler gone from Minnesota, now part of the Blackhawks organization. Now let's jump into the trade rumors I want to discuss today and kick things off with the Winnipeg Jets. We have another major update on the Dustin Byfuglien situation, as reported by many NHL insiders, including Chris Johnston yesterday. The Winnipeg Jets and Dustin Byfuglien are apparently working on and close to coming to an agreement to terminate his contract, which would thus make him an unrestricted free agent. Of course, normally in this process, he would be forfeiting the remainder of his contract, so the money he would have earned this year as well as next, because he does have one more year left on his deal. Byfuglien has not skated as of yet. It's been reported he likely is not going to play this year. I guess that could always change. I guess we'll see if any other teams want to take a chance on him, or if he's even able to sign with the team based on his health and play it all for the current season. I guess once that actually takes place, we'll find out if there is interest or what the status is. But the last reports we had is Byfuglien hadn't even begun skating yet, so it's clearly going to take him some time to get the ankle rehabbed a little bit more on the ice, as well as get into game shape. He hasn't been skating as I had surgery. Byfuglien's a big man to begin with. I would imagine it's going to take him a while to get into game shape should he decide he wants to sign and play with another NHL club. So I guess we'll have to keep an eye on that situation. Not sure exactly when, but based on reports, it could be any day now. We should get word that they come to a conclusion to this and he's put on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. I can't imagine he would be claimed, and then he'll become a UFA, and we'll have to wait and see what the future holds for Byfuglien. But clearly, as much as the Jets would like to have Byfuglien in their lineup, I'm sure they're going to be happy to have this saga over with and now have their freedom to their cap space here, that they can actually go out and make an acquisition to their blue line. They have a big chunk of their blue line on league minimum or entry-level contracts, so they really don't have a lot of money invested there because of the Byfuglien situation. They really need somebody back there with more experience after all the moves that they made during the last offseason. Having this news from Byfuglien right at the beginning of training camp was a big blow to this lineup and has really had a major impact on this team. If he was healthy and playing with them all year, I'm sure they'd be doing much better than they currently sit in the standings. It's really unclear how much they want to spend to get themselves into a playoff spot right now. Clearly, there's lots of defensemen out there who they could look to, but they would prefer somebody with term. Now that they have that longer-term salary cap situation kind of solved, or at least it appears that they do, they can take on a player with term. They've already gone through a lot of turnover on that blue line. If they can find somebody who's young enough and capable enough to help them out on a blue line, they're going to want somebody who can stick around for a little while. So if the Jets do go ahead and make an acquisition, they certainly would prefer somebody with some term. There's certainly lots of rental defensemen out there, but they probably wouldn't want to make that acquisition unless they could be assured they could come to an agreement on a contract extension, keep them around. A couple of names that come to mind that are not necessarily linked through any kind of inside information, but there's been lots of talk this year about Shane Gostisbehere with the Flyers. He could use a fresh start. He's the type of defenseman that the Jets could use. He's got term. He does have a lot of potential. I know he struggled as of late, but you know what? He's had some good seasons before, has a lot of potential, young enough. That might be somebody who they might want to take a look at. There's been a lot of talk about their rival in Minnesota, Matt Dumba or Jonas Brodin, possibly being on the trade block. I know it's a little bit less likely that they would do a trade with a division rival like that, but still, you never know. We're seeing it a little bit more common in more recent years here that the division rivals will actually make deals with each other. So hard to say exactly who they target, but there's lots of guys out there who could certainly help the Jets, and now they'll actually have the ability to go out and make a move. Now, one name that was being tossed around before that they could use as trade bait to make an acquisition would be young forward Jack Roslovic, who's still kind of coming into his own and slowly realizing his potential, but he certainly still has a way to grow here before he can say he's fully reached his potential for sure. But certainly he's a guy to keep your eye on within the Jets lineup who they could use as a trade chip. Next up, I want to talk about the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the Canucks are in a situation where I don't really expect them to be making a ton of moves ahead of the deadline. They're having an excellent season. It's probably safe to say that their rebuild phase is over. Now they're heading into playoff contender phase. I'm not sure that they're exactly a cup contender as of yet, but they're certainly having a bit of a surprise season. I certainly expected them to be better than last year. I certainly expected them to compete for a playoff spot. I did not expect them to be sitting in first place for an extended time in their division. So certainly kudos to the Canucks for having a strong year. A lot of their young players are really coming into their own and playing big roles on this team. But one of the big question marks moving forward is in goal with goaltender Jacob Markstrom, who's having a pretty solid year. He's been pretty good for them the last couple of years, and he's coming up on an expiring contract that's either going to be extended or he's going to be heading to free agency. Now, Jim Benning's been on record to say that they'd like to get something done to keep him in the fold. The only question is, for how long? The Canucks certainly have some interesting young goalie prospects coming up through the ranks here. Plus, they have Thatcher Demko already in the backup situation, who's got a lot of potential as well. They got Michael DiPietro in the system too. So clearly, they're going to want to make room for their younger goalies to gain bigger roles over the next little while. It's been reported that the contract extension that they've been offering him, something comparable to what we saw Darcy Kuemper sign with the Arizona Coyotes, a 2-year deal. And quite honestly, most insiders believe that's not going to come anywhere close to getting it done for them to keep Markstrom away from free agency in the summer. He's probably looking at a minimum 3, probably 4-year deals. What he's likely expecting, probably somewhere in the $6 million range. His recent stats over the past couple of seasons certainly afford him to have at least a middle-of-the-road or better goaltending contract. If you take a look at the top goalie contracts all the way down to the bottom, there's certainly reason to believe that he should be a lot closer to the top. So therefore, he knows he's going to get paid a lot more money if he hits the open market. Just a matter of, does he want to stay in Vancouver? What's he willing to accept? Because it's not only the young goalies and getting more playing time that they have to think about. It's not that far off, and we're going to have another expansion draft. And if they have to protect a guy like Markstrom, then that's going to clearly expose one of their other young goalies like Demko, which they're not going to want to do. So it's not only here about money. A lot of contracts being negotiated now, especially for veteran players who want to have that security to stay put, are going to be wanting no trade or no move clauses. So they're going to be exempt from the expansion draft and won't be able to be selected. And that's something that teams are going to probably be handcuffed by here. So it's not just about the money, although that does appear to be an issue here as well. It could be a combination of term, money, and the clauses involved when it comes to the protection of the player being traded or selected in the expansion draft. So certainly not going to be easy by any means to get this done, even though both sides appear to be interested. Would not be surprised to see this play out and head into the offseason, but I really don't think the Canucks are going to be making any trades in that regard. I don't see them moving Markstrom. That would be foolish at this point. They're clearly going to use him for the remainder of the year and hope they can work something out in the offseason if they need to. If the Canucks do make any other moves ahead of the deadline, I could see maybe adding a depth piece or two, but really, for the most part, Jim Benning, I think, did most of his work last offseason. A lot of that work is coming to fruition here and playing well, and to see how far they can go in the early stages of being a playoff contender. I think they still have lower expectations than being a cup contender, so even if they make the playoffs and don't go too far, it doesn't make sense to spend a lot to try to go deep into playoffs right now. At least I don't think. They can take their time with this and slowly build upon this over the next few years and get back to being a Stanley Cup contender. Now, lastly here, I want to touch on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, first off, I want to kick things off with Jake Muzzin and the potential contract negotiations we might see unfold between the player and the team over the coming weeks. Now, certainly there's been reported on Saturday headlines as well as other segments here by insiders Chris Johnson and Elliot Friedman, indicating that there's a lot of interest between Muzzin and the Leafs for them to do an extension and keep him in the fold for a number of years in the future here, but it's going to be very difficult to do. I mean, Jake Muzzin's proven to be, probably defensively speaking, their best defenseman. And certainly defensively is an area that the Leafs need to get better. If they were to lose Muzzin, that's certainly going to create another hole in the blue line, which already needs improvement, which will create more of a challenge for Kyle Dubas in the offseason to try to address if they can't get him signed. But many believe that Muzzin will likely get paid more on the open market due to the fact that the Maple Leafs are tied up against the cap and they can only afford so much. It's been reported that the Maple Leafs likely are going to want to offer somewhere around a 3-year deal that's kind of front-loaded with a lot of bonuses, so we get a lot of cash up front. That certainly might seem appealing to Muzzin, but at the same time, he might be able to get a little bit more security and more money elsewhere. So not going to be an easy contract. Like I said, Muzzin wants to stay, but he's only going to be willing to accept so much of a discount. but he's only going to be willing to accept so much of a discount to stick around here with the Maple Leafs. Now, of course, as we also saw the other night on Saturday night, Kasperi Kapanen was a healthy scratch. They made us wait all the way until Monday morning after their morning skate to update really the information as to what caused that to happen, and it was announced by Sheldon Keefe and even the player himself late for a practice recently. So clearly not a big deal, but of course, due to the fact that there was no information given, there was lots of chatter about a potential trade and something was going down, but I really didn't expect that, considering all along the update was supposed to come from the head coach. Anything else coming from Kyle Dubas certainly would have generated probably more of a buzz, but that was not the case at all. I'm not really sure why they couldn't have just come out and said on Saturday night that he violated a team rule, he was late or something to that effect, and that he's being scratched. It's really not a big deal. It's something that happens once in a while, especially with younger players. I know the Leafs are hopeful that he'll learn from this, kind of like what we saw a couple times with Nazem Kadri early in his career. He broke a couple of rules being late, and he was suspended for a game or so, and clearly he's turned out to be quite a good long-time pro. So they're hoping the same thing here for Kapanen, although his name does remain out there in trade rumors. Although I don't think being late for practice is really going to change what the Leafs' plans are here in any shape or form. But after last night's loss to the Florida Panthers, I know there's lots of Leaf fans out there screaming for a move. Frederik Andersen did go down injured. Right now it's not clear how long he's going to be out of action, but Michael Hutchinson came into the game. They blew a 2-goal lead in the third period with the Florida Panthers coming back to beat them in the third, which is a really, really important game. The Panthers and the Leafs are certainly neck and neck in the standings. Only them not getting the points, but the Panthers getting the points is even worse in the standings here. So I know there's lots of Leaf fans out there on social media today screaming for Cody Ceci to be moved or at least to be sat out, and of course for a backup goaltending situation to be addressed. And clearly that's something that the Maple Leafs probably should do. Earlier in the season, we've gone through a stretch where Michael Hutchinson was not performing well, and I will acknowledge he has been better lately, but you certainly have to question right now what Kyle Dubas and the Leafs should do. There's lots of goaltenders out there that could be interesting for them to take on. The only problem is if they go out there in a panic now, Kyle Dubas is not going to have a lot of luck with other GMs helping him out. He's likely going to have to overpay and to bring in another goaltender, and there's a lot of them that would be interesting but are making too much money. Even if the other team retained up to 50% of the salary, it would still be challenging for what the Leafs would have to give up to bring that player in, and I'm not really sure in a lot of cases that it makes sense. But there's lots of goalies out there. You could look to the Penguins, where they've got three guys between Murray, Jerry, and Casey DeSmith, who's been down in the minors. Casey DeSmith's making over $1 million, though, so it might be a little bit tricky to do. I can't help but wonder, maybe if they talk to a team like the Minnesota Wild, maybe try to pry Alex Stalock out. He's got 2 more years on his contract, just at over $700,000. That would work well for them, and he's been a half-decent backup goaltender. He's got some decent numbers in Minnesota this year. Oftentimes, in my opinion, at least played better than Dubnyk more recently. So I know that's certainly something that might be intriguing. Of course, the New York Rangers goaltender Alexander Georgiev has been mentioned numerous times, but I think the price tag is going to be very high. You get the Blackhawks with 2 pending UFA goalies in Leonard and Crawford, but they're in a playoff hunt right now. I don't see either of those guys being traded. And even if they were, again, the price tag would be high. We've heard about Craig Anderson in Ottawa. He could be on the move, pending UFA, probably at the end of his career, but he makes over $4 million, even with a 50% retention. That's still going to be tricky, and really he's been shaky a lot over the last couple of years too. I'm not really sure that he would be the answer. You get Aaron Dell in San Jose, certainly been not the greatest, most consistent backup goalie, but he did have stretches in the past where he was one of the better backup goalies, had some great stats, but the last couple of years, him and Jones both have been very iffy at times, so not sure. But contract-wise and term-wise and everything that they'd be looking at, that could work for them on a short-term basis. I guess the price tag might not be too high on Dell, but that's maybe a possibility, but certainly not the greatest solution out there. Like I said, a lot of the guys that you would look to would probably be too expensive, either making too much money or they'd have to give up too much. So I'm really not sure how Kyle Dubas goes about addressing this while also trying to add on the blue line as well. The only way they're going to add on the blue line, or one of the main ways, depending on what they have to spend on a goaltender, would be to move the $4.5 million deal of Cody Ceci. But is a team going to take him after not having the greatest play this year? It's not going to be easy to do. So if you're a Leaf fan out there, I know there's lots screaming for CC and Hutchinson to go and other guys to come in and help out. What are your proposed trades? What do you want to see Kyle Dubas do? And who are your prime trade targets you'd like to see him try to bring into the organization. So that is all your latest news updates for today. Of course, as always, we'll know your thoughts and opinions and everything down in the comment section, so let me know what you think and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and checking out our channel membership options as well. All kinds of great perks that you can be checking out with Top Shelf Hockey as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.